Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to another story of a mother's heart, stories of healing, heartache, and hope. And today we have the beautiful Lori Larson with us. I want to acknowledge Lori, the strength and the courage it takes to share your story, the vulnerability. These are stories that are deeply heartfelt. They're true stories, and they're stories of life and loss, but they're held with love all the way through. And so we want to honor that. And I certainly welcome you, Lori, to step in, and we're going to share her story of her baby, Eva, and what Eva brought you, and the life that she is and was, and everything in between. So however you'd like to begin, Lori, I welcome you to begin.
Thank you for this space, Tracey. It just always gives Eva's life a little more purpose when I get to share our story.
Yeah.
I'm going to start just way back at my conception.
Okay, wonderful.
It took 3 years for my parents to conceive me, and I knew that was always my story. Mom had endometriosis, and she actually went in to have surgery done, and that's when they discovered she was pregnant with me. And my dad just called me on my birthday recently, and he told me how he cried when he was out of town working, but when my mom called him and told him I couldn't have surgery because I'm pregnant, he cried, and he was relaying that memory with me. And I said, I actually know what that feels like now, Dad. Like I've heard this my whole life, and now I understand. And he said, yes, but I don't understand what it's like to lose a child, because his had a happy ending.
Yeah.
So my husband and I have been together. We're high school sweethearts. And we were right around 30 when we decided to start our family. And our eldest, Max, was born in 2010. He came easily. And I had always been a little nervous after my conception story that maybe I would have similar issues as my mom, or I was always a little heightened about that. So when Max came with ease, I thought, okay, that is not my story. And I jumped into motherhood. We started trying for a sibling for Max in 2014. I was raised as an only child. I have 2 much older siblings. But I just knew that I wanted siblings. I wanted to raise siblings. When I was in college, I even did papers on sibling rivalry. And I hadn't experienced it, and I wanted to give that to my child. Not that my childhood wasn't beautiful, but just what I wanted for my family.
Yes.
And so my husband's mother died in 2014, and that really was the shove we needed to start trying again. Life is short. We wanted our parents to enjoy our children. My dad is a little on the older side. And so we started trying at the same time as my husband's brother and his wife, Paulina, my sister-in-law. And she's really more my sister and my best friend. So here we thought, wouldn't it be great, this childhood dream of having a baby with your best friend? And she became pregnant, and then her younger sister became pregnant. And that ended up being their story and not our story. And I was so happy for them. And we have a beautiful nephew because of it. But in 2015, so a whole year after we started trying, let me stop that for 1 second. Okay. So when we started trying, I was doing all the, taking care of my body. I'd gone on a health journey like a lot of us do. We hit the 30s and we realized we're not eating right. And so I'd done this big healing journey, and I was feeling really good in my body. And to top it off, I started yoga teacher training with my yoga teacher. And it was a 6-month, like every other weekend, super intense. And I told her, we're trying to conceive. Shh. And if this happens, I might not be able to do more of the difficult poses. And but it didn't happen during that. I had all these stories along the way. Wouldn't it be great if the baby was conceived during yoga teacher training, or wouldn't it be great if the baby was conceived so Max could be home when it was born in the summer because he was just starting kindergarten, and all these timelines I would create in my head that never panned out. Still trying to have control, Tracey. So September 2015, we were pregnant, and I thought, okay, great, here we are. It took a year, longer than Max, but we're off and moving, and I already got a doula. And we told Max right away. He was 5 at the time, and we were laying in bed one night, snuggled up, and I had a pop in my side, like just a moment when I knew something wasn't right. And all of a sudden I started bleeding and throwing up, and we rushed to the hospital with Max, and my mom came and got him shortly after. So I was trying to keep calm for him. But I was miscarrying, obviously. And that took a whole week for that miscarriage to transpire. It all happened naturally. And I just know I was holding on to that baby so hard. I wasn't wanting to release it. And I finally did do a little yoga practice and released physically. And so that was the journey with the miscarriage. And it was just absolutely devastating. When we spoke before, I said, I think in some ways it was more tragic than Eva, just the way that it rocked me and took away that innocence. And I learned so many lessons about grief, and thank goodness for my yoga practice, but so much that would carry me through to Eva. Like that was my little precursor, not little, huge precursor to Eva, to teach me what I needed to know to carry me through her life and death. So, it was devastating. It was hard. And I locked myself in the bathroom and just cry. Our son knew what happened. It's interesting. I got a little tattoo with some friends of a little girl playing telephone, like talking. So each of us have a little girl on our foot that's talking through a can. There's 3 of us. And above my little girl, I put a shooting star for our miscarriage. And Max, I remember one night, told his little friend, my mom has a tattoo on her foot for the baby that we lost. And so I was balancing this, trying to be honest with him while still locking myself away and crying because he couldn't see all of it. And 2016 was kind of a year of reflection and growth, and like, okay, working on acceptance and surrendering and letting loose of some control and those huge lessons. I had taken care of my body. I'd done everything right, and it still wasn't in my control. And so we weren't getting pregnant easily again. So 2017 rolls around. I know it's been 3 years. And my good friend Lucinda, who you actually interviewed, I loved that interview. She's an amazing woman and in tune spiritually. So she had saw this book on Amazon and just felt called to gift it to me. And it was Spirit Babies by Walter McKitchen. Anyone who knows Spirit Babies knows this book. And it blew me open. I identified with it so much. It felt like a missing link. And in some ways, I know it was. I know so much in reflection. I'm going to say that probably a lot of times through this interview, but I don't think Eva would have come through if I didn't have that understanding of what he taught in that book, of spirit, of our children being in other realms and a contract and all of that.
Exactly.
Yes. And so I just started doing the meditations and the chanting right away. And it didn't take long for Eva to come through. She actually came through really heavily during the few days that I believe we conceived her. And when I saw her in this meditation, she kind of ran up behind me and put her arms around me from behind. And that's how I still feel her when she's really loving on me. It's always like she's snuggling me from behind. And she looked a lot like me as a little girl with pigtails. She was like 4 or 5. I hear a lot of people say that that's kind of where they see the age of light children or spirit babies. And she told me that she was coming soon and that she'd love me for lifetimes. And I just lost it and started bawling because it felt so true. But I'd never had an experience like this. And I didn't know if I could trust it, if it was my mind, my longing for this child, my longing for a daughter. And so I knew that if this child came and was a girl, then I could definitely trust it, right? So that was really the big moment that helped me trust everything that came after with her. That was huge, to be able to, know that what I was hearing, what I was seeing was real. So Eva came, she came quick, March 3rd. I know all this timeline. I was keeping a journal throughout my whole conception journey. So I've got 5 years of a journal.
Wow.
From pregnancy through, from that first finding out I was pregnant with that, what ended up being a miscarriage, all the way through Eva, to grief, through. So it's really just, I was doing it for therapy, but now it's so much more than that. It's so much documentation of this beautiful journey that we had together, and all these moments that, in the moment you don't know if they're real, and then when you reflect you go, oh my goodness, like she's told me things that came true that rock me still. So I found out on my niece's birthday, March 3rd, that I was pregnant with Eva, and we were obviously more cautious this time with sharing with Max. And I'd been really open about my miscarriage online. And I was really moved by the people who had reached out to me and admitted their own miscarriages. They didn't feel safe talking about it publicly, but they were saying, thank you, oh, I have someone I can identify with. I felt so lonely. And so that was really moving and gave me the drive to keep sharing all through our journey with Eva. And so the first half of our pregnancy was wonderful. I was nervous, of course. I had experienced miscarriage, so I was waiting for the blood, that nervousness that you feel. But we had some really amazing moments together, really big moments for my life. One of them being I was given the opportunity to write my first story at work. I worked for an oral history program, and I've been a historical researcher, but never had the confidence, I guess, in myself to write a story with someone. So when I was pregnant with Eva, I wrote my first story that was, put into a compilation book on the Korean War. It was with a woman who was a refugee. It was just, her parents were refugees, I should say, during the Korean War. And so it was just a really moving experience. And this woman even shared her loss that she'd experienced with me. I had opened up with her about miscarriage, and she had shared her own. She was really an open woman, so that was a great story to tell. Another really awesome thing that Eva and I did was I traveled for the first time off of North America. I live in Washington State, and my best friend moved to New Zealand had moved a few years prior. So I felt like this was my chance to go see her. I'd been wanting to, I'd missed her. Here we were going to be a family of 4. It'd be a lot more expensive for us to go in the future. So this was kind of like a shot to go with Eva. I was like 18, 19 weeks pregnant. Yeah. What a horrendous flight, 12 hours pregnant, but we did it. And I love that Laura, my friend, got to be with Eva in that time, because she never got another chance to be. And I just think Eva needed to be on that land for some reason. We took a girls' trip around the South Island and went to hot springs, but we went to this really magical place called Castle Rock, and nobody was there the morning we went. It was just kind of foggy. And it's a place that the Dalai Lama named like one of 7 energy centers of the world. So I don't know, there's just something like that, even more specific, I feel like she needed to be at. And I actually have a tattoo on my arm that I just recently got. If I can show it, I don't know very easily, but there's ferns on it. And I didn't know if I wanted to name, it wasn't just my decision, but wanted to name Eva Fern or Eva. Those were the two names we were choosing at the time. And the silver fern in New Zealand is very significant to the Maori culture. The koru is what I have on my arm, meaning new life, rebirth, all of that. So there's lots of significance in this tattoo relating to her, and it just means so much. There was a long time planning this, but I love that the ferns are on there. I would practice yoga in front of a fern every morning while pregnant with her. So much significance in all of that. But that was the last of the innocence with Eva. So I came home and went to the 20-week anatomy scan. I took Max. He knew about UNO. Daddy had to work, so I just took him. And it was a wonderful moment to share with him. He was so excited to see his baby on the screen. But it ended up being a longer ultrasound, and they said, we can't get a good shot of her brain. She's moving too much. Which now I've heard a lot of people's stories say that they're moving too much. But I kind of blew it off and okay, she's moving too much. The next week I went to see my midwife. So we'd planned this amazing birth in a birth house. So instead of having a home birth, it was going to be in this setting where there's a tub and the midwives, and it's not at the hospital, it's in a birthing home. And I just had this dream all along with my second child. This birth house was built, and I took a tour of it a couple weeks before Max was born. So it wasn't available when he was born. So I just had this dream for so long and here we were gonna birth in this birth house, and I was seeing the midwives, and they're so awesome. And I went in to see them after the anatomy scan, and we sat down, and she's like, she's got a club foot, but that's no big deal. Club foot's no big deal. And you've got extra fluid, and that on its own is no big deal. And then oddly, the ultrasound technician said that her chin was measuring small, and I've just never heard anything like that. And so that was the first spark of like, oh, something is not right here. But my optimistic, positive self is just Googling all the positive stories. Like, how could I find the good stuff? I didn't want to see the bad. And it would take 3 weeks before I could go see a specialist. And by that time, I was almost 24 weeks. And I really wish they could have gotten me in sooner. And I went alone to that appointment. I was still just kind of living naively. My husband couldn't make it once again. He wishes he could now. And my mom and my sister-in-law, Paulina, offered to go. And no, I'm just going to go to work afterwards. It was an hour away. But that was the big crusher. So they did that ultrasound, and they came in, the specialist, and just listed a whole host of anomalies they found with my baby. Oh my. And I was in shock. I was being my type A self and taking notes and not crying, and just like, okay, I got to document it. Like, oh, what's this? Let me make sure I've got all that you're saying here. Do you have any questions? And I always have questions. I had no questions. I was just like dumbfounded.
Overwhelmed.
I saw a geneticist during that same visit. They rushed me into a room with a geneticist who was over the screen. She was in a different office. And there was I'll never forget, a little like placard sitting next to me that says, my family has some pretty twisted genes. Or my family tree is pretty twisted, or something like that. Okay. And I thought that was funny at the time. Now I don't think it's as funny, but I don't know. That just sticks in my head. Like, there was so much going on in that moment. And here I am with a geneticist, and she's telling me that it's probably not the 3 main chromosomal abnormalities like Downs or Tri13. It looks like it's something rare, because it's not those type of abnormalities that they're seeing with her. And during this visit, I had 4 days to decide of termination, because in our state, 24 weeks is the cutoff. And I am pro-choice, but in that moment, I'm just like, what do you mean? What? No, this is my baby I've been planning for. No way. Yes. That's why I say, like, I wish they would have, I don't know. No judgment on anyone. I always say that is just such a loving decision. Any decision made by loving parents is a loving decision.
So much courage to go either direction. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So my heart is always there for mothers who make that choice, and fathers. But just kind of just show like all that came through that one appointment of, you could do termination. Here's her genetic, blah, blah, blah. It was just so much. So right across the street from this is an hour away from my home, but this is in Tacoma, which is where I grew up, in Tacoma, Washington. And right across the street from the specialist is a park that my grandma used to take me to, with a conservatory that's always had so much meaning. I have a picture of this conservatory in my kitchen. Grandma would take me there. She loved plants. She would steal seeds out of people's yards and stuff. She would always make sure when she snapped a photo of me, I was standing in front of some pretty bush or something, you know. So after that visit, I just went over there and sat with grandma outside the conservatory, and that would become a theme throughout the rest of my pregnancy, going to the specialist that was right there. Eva then ended up being born right there in a level 4 NICU. And the kicker is, this is just blocks from where my grandma was born and raised. So Eva is named after my grandma. Her name was Bertha Eva. She would never want me to name my child Bertha, I joke. But my grandma's mother was Eva. Wow. And Eva had 13 children. I'm a genealogist. I enjoy family history, and looking at the timelines, I'm sure she had a miscarriage in there, but I just don't see where she had any sort of infant loss, which is pretty miraculous for the 1920s and 30s and 40s. Big family through the Depression. So I felt such synchronicity having my baby girl's only life on earth be just blocks from where my grandma was born, where my great grandma, they were holding me. And my grandma Bert, I would ask for her strength, because she was such a strong woman. She, at 42, gave birth prematurely to a baby boy that should not have lived. My Uncle Darren is an ex-Marine, alive and thriving to this day. He was I will use miracle a lot, and I think every single baby is a miracle, but his situation was truly miraculous. And he, I believe, was here in a lot of ways to be with her when she lost her husband 2 years later. My uncle was born on their 24th anniversary, I believe it was. His first birthday was their 25th. And then boom, grandma lost grandpa at 48 to a heart attack. But she always said, Darren helped me through. I had this little one to worry about. So I would ask her in these moments at the conservatory for strength and guidance. And she's one of the strongest people I can think of to make it through all that. And so we just kept moving along with this pregnancy, and I ended up doing amniocentesis. That late in the game, I debated because of the risk factor, but we found out Eva had a genetic, it was rare abnormality called Miller-Dieker syndrome. So the main component is something called lissencephaly, and it means the brain is smooth. It doesn't develop the same grooves that you and I have. So it comes with a whole host of developmental delays. No walking, no talking, no sitting up, trouble with breathing and lung issues. They start having seizures at just a few months old that strip any development that they get. And no doctors around us really knew about this syndrome because it was so rare. So I was able to find parents on Facebook. There was a group And I was just asking them, what was your baby like at birth? For the first month, Tracey, I thought she was going to die. Like, all I heard is life expectancy of 2, and that she had so many complications. My first thought was just, she's going to die. She's going to die. She's going to die. And then a friend had a dream, a fellow yogini, and she messaged me and told me to sit down. And in the dream, it was of Eva. I was there with Max and another child, and I was busy. And that gave me hope for the future. I'll tell you that dream did. And she was with Eva, this friend, in the dream. And Eva, she said, looked different and acted different, but she regardless, she was just full of love and was this baby. And that Eva didn't like the plastic container we put her in. I remember that being a part of the dream. But this is what sparked oh my goodness, she's going to live. And I need to figure out, we're special needs parents. All that. So my researcher side just kicked into high gear, which is probably a good thing to give myself something to do during those. It was 2 months of carrying Eva after her diagnosis. And like I said, I was getting all this information from other parents and finding out these Miller-Dieker babies ended up being pretty typical at birth, and reaching all the things that they expect a newborn to reach. And so we met with palliative care at the hospital and had a big conference and discussed comfort care. So we really wanted Eva to lead the way. We didn't want a lot of intervention. And there was one doctor in there who had a child in his care that had Miller-Dieker. So that was really promising. And this doctor was a palliative care doctor. And those are some special doctors. I didn't even know what palliative care was. I've heard of hospice, but not palliative care. And so this is end of life, complicated diagnoses, I guess is a better way to explain it. So children with complicated diagnoses. And just a little side note, when I was in the hospital with Eva, I remember telling this doctor one time how, he was trying to be hopeful and saying all these things. And I said, I'm just happy I get to hold her in my arms. And he just started crying. And like right there, seeing the doctor cry provides so much humanity. And after that, he would come in and we would chit chat about travel. And he would ask me, I know the nurses and the doctors were kind of nervous about me because they never saw me cry in the hospital. I don't know why I was so stoic. I wasn't trying to be.
Strength coming through.
It was all about her. And he said, when do you cry? And I said, well, when I, on my way home. And he said, sometimes I pull over off the freeway to cry, like a gentle nudge, like don't be crying on your way home. Like, be careful out there. Anyways, that's just a little side note of the dignity and respect. And that hospital let us lead the way with our little girl. They don't want me to say it, but they broke some rules and really just made sure that most people don't get this. And it breaks my heart, but made sure that we got the time that we wanted with our girl. And so, those last couple months carrying Eva were the toughest of my life. That balancing of grief, it's anticipatory grief.
Yes.
She's growing, she's kicking, she's moving, she's thriving inside me. But as soon as she's born, a whole can of worms is opened up and she's not safe anymore. And people would ask, like, oh, what are you having? When are you due? All those happy things we ask. Yeah. Of course I would too. And every single happy comment just like gutted me. And I remember even in Kelly Meehan Spirit Baby group, when I first got the diagnosis, because I was just like, Eva, we had this connection. Where's the warning? Why didn't you, why wasn't this known? And I posted in Kelly's group, like, just kind of that question, just my world is rocked. And now I know you know, a lot of mothers have that intuition, but we can't. That's just too big to really recognize until it's over. On the acupuncture table during my trying to conceive journey, I had a vision of me and Max, my son, looking at a dead baby on a bed and a table. And that was something I tucked away, you know, of course, but that was intuition right there. Reflection, I tell you, all that stuff comes to light. But yeah, I would tell you that, like, you were my last chance, you can't leave me. And all those fears of raising a special needs child with so many complications, you don't want them to suffer. That was like our biggest thing. We don't want her to suffer. That's what the comfort care is about. And her not keeping her here with a lot of intervention. And once again, no judgment to anyone's decisions. It's such a personal choice. So we ended up doing induction at 37 weeks because she just wasn't growing. She was tiny. And we walked into the hospital that day. It was a beautiful sunrise on our way to the hospital, an hour away. And it just felt like there was this white cloud we were walking into of the unknown. We have no idea if I'm going to continue working. Am I stay-at-home mom now? Is she going to live? Is she going to die? When is she going to come home? Are we going to be in the NICU for months? Just so many unknowns. Our whole world was just up in the air. God, yes. My girlfriend says, at least it didn't feel like it was a black cloud you were walking into. I'm like, yes, so true. Oh. But my yoga journey and my understanding of meditation and all that, you know, I thought I was doing that for other reasons, but really it was for this. Yeah. It was for my conception journey. And I don't know where I would be without that understanding. And during yoga training, I knew I'm very flexible by nature. It's just my body type. I was more into the spiritual aspect, and my teacher could see that. Like when we would do yoga nidra and just these different things I was being exposed to, it was opening me up to this knowledge that would carry me through the life and death of my daughter. So, you know, we're sitting in the hospital, induction is going on, and I'm trying to meditate and trying to breathe and trying to connect with her, and trying to find the beauty in all of it, because this is Eva's birthday. And I birthed my babies fast. My doula didn't make it on time. Eva was born at 7:17 p.m. with her daddy and her grandma and her brother there with her. 17 is a magical number for her. So she was born in 2017 at 7:17, missing a portion of chromosome 17.
That's right. Yes.
She was 17 inches long, like all these things. And it was just, her dad thought a miracle happened when she was born. We did not expect her to be so full of life. Her eyes were open for the first 2 hours. It's like she knew she was here for a brief time and she was going to take us in, just like we were going to take her in. She nursed for the first and only time. She had issues with sucking. And so those first 2 hours, she was just in my arms. We didn't even weigh her or anything. We had an older nurse who had been in nursing 35 plus years. So she was real calm and cool. And she had Max hold the oxygen mask over Eva's face when Eva didn't really need air, but just she needed a little jolt when she was born. And just including Max in that way, not making it seem so scary, was so big. And one of my amazing coworkers, we were such a close-knit little family, and they couldn't have been more supportive of me. My 75-year-old boss buying me chocolate chip cookies and, you know, just doing whatever he could to make sure I was good. I can't even imagine. He was locked in a room with me for 2 months, just me and him. And here I am just living this nightmare. He was so wonderful. So this other coworker comes to the hospital. She's an awesome photographer and captured so many beautiful moments in those first 2 hours that I cherished. Eva she was put on a ventilator a few days later. So those were like the only moments of her purely cord free. And we got her pictures of her little body and all of us as a family, and her little brother holding, like daddy petting her. And I don't know, just so beautiful. So grateful to that friend of mine. She had just gotten home, I think from Arizona, hopped off an airplane and showed up at the hospital.
Wow.
People are amazing. Like Eva brought love, but she made us recognize so much love surrounds us. People are down to like the hearing test lady in the hospital. That was one of my few times I cracked. She came in and Eva failed her hearing test, and I just threw my hands up and said, "That is the least of my concerns." And I ran out of the room, and Dad talked to this lady, and turned out that lady had lost a child to a home accident. And then she had known someone whose child had lissencephaly and written a book about it, which is what Eva had. And so like these people that get put in your pathway, she even sent me a sympathy card afterwards. I mean, she's just the hearing test lady at the hospital, but yeah, those moments really stick with you. Those little gentle nudges from humans. So yeah, Eva's birth was awesome. I didn't sleep that first night. I just snuggled her in bed, and shared her on Facebook and Instagram. Just everyone had known what was happening. And I had said, please give us our space. We will share Eva when we're ready. And I was ready because everything had just happened so beautifully, and she was thriving. She was thriving. Amazing. And so the first few days were like that. We ended up in the NICU because her body temperature was hard to control. But we had just gotten a new NICU at this hospital too. So they're private rooms. There's a bed that folds out. I was staying in the room with Eva. They let Joe stay on the maternity ward. A nurse came in one evening to take my blood pressure, and there's my husband laying in bed. But I mean, like they said, we got extra beds. We lived an hour away. Wow. So we just stayed there for, I think, 3 or 4 days. Both of us, and I stayed in the room with her, and I could pick her up whenever I wanted to. They took all the alarms off. Normally they have like an alarm. So when the baby's taken off the heating bed, the nurses know. But as long as one of us was in the room with Eva, they took off a lot of that stuff, just letting us be parents to this baby. Yeah. And I got to change her diaper, and it was just great. Those are really good memories. And that's when people came to see her. I kind of kept people away. I thought Eva was coming home, and I didn't want those NICU babies exposed. I didn't want to bring in all my family, friends, so we were limited, but there are a handful of people that got to meet her, and that's so special. And then we discovered, right when we're trying to take Eva home, getting her a flat car seat, because she was so tiny, 3 pounds, 10 ounces. She wouldn't fit in a normal car seat. So we had to get this. Yeah. Anyway, it was a whole fiasco, and we got the car seat and we're headed home. But they'd done some barium tests, because during the ultrasounds, it looked like she might have had some intestinal issues. So on the day we were going to leave, the doctor comes in to report that, there's a narrowing in between her stomach and intestines, and we could take her home. But if she needs to be readmitted, she'd be going to the PICU instead of the NICU. So for pediatric versus neonatal. And my baby girl was so tiny. I just loved those NICU nurses, and they're so good with those teeny tiny babies, that after a lot of thought of even doing that surgery, because here we were with our life limited girl, we put a do not resuscitate order on her. I had no idea that was even a thing for babies, but we wanted her to lead the way, and we didn't want to get in the way of that. Wow. We removed that for surgery. All these things you just don't even consider. So at 5 days old, we ended up doing major surgery on our baby girl that we were not going to do this with. But she came through it like a champ. Wow. She had her appendix taken out. She had her intestines corrected, like taken out. They were malrotated, put in the right way. She had a G tube inserted because we were going to have to feed her through a nasal tube anyway. So we thought they suggested while we're in, you want, sure. Just amazing, this little tiny girl, what they were able to, and all of her health complications to boot, you know, all the brain issues. And yeah, so then the next few weeks was just husband and son go to work and school, and I every morning rush to Eva. I didn't even want to stop for a cup of coffee, just get me to her, you know. And I would just sit there and stare at her and sing to her and read to her. And we have a nurse that's very special to us. And she loved one of the books I read to Eva, so I got that for her daughter. Aww. And yeah, all the NICU nurses that would share their stories of baby loss. There's a lot of NICU nurses that get into that business because they've experienced their own.
That, yeah.
So that takes, yeah, I don't know. Just, I can't gush enough about the experience we had in the hospital. I feel so blessed. So at 22 days old, which is Eva's last day of life, she had another barium test. Everything was healed on the inside. She had her first bowel movement, which was a huge celebration. That means everything was working. She gained weight. She was now 4 pounds. And we tried multiple times to get her off the ventilator. She breathed fine before surgery, but it wasn't happening. And we couldn't do the necessary steps really because we didn't want air in her stomach while it was healing. So now that everything was healed, we could do the more vigorous getting her off the ventilator. And that last day of life we did, and she was handling it well. Like, she shocked everyone that was her last day of life. That was not expected, even though her life was limited. You know, she just was so thriving. And when I would change her diaper, she'd get so feisty and wrinkle her forehead and scream. And even though she couldn't scream with the ventilator down her throat, but she wanted to. She was feisty. That is definitely a word to describe her. Oh. My little girl. So that last day, she looked at me just straight in the eyes, not googly eyed like she had. She was saying goodbye. And our nurse was there for that moment. Like, she remembers that. And I didn't know it at the time, of course, but I got a chance to tell her how brave she was to choose this life, how much she taught us, how much she's loved, just all those things. I am so grateful I got to say out loud to her, yeah. Even though I still do, but in that body of hers. Yeah. So I went home a little early that night to wash her cute sheets. That's the only thing I could do was dress her bedding, not her. And we got a call that they needed to put her back on the ventilator. And I'd gotten that call a couple times before. And it was never urgent, but this sounded urgent. And I said, should I come up there? Yes. Should I bring your dad? Yes. My husband goes to bed early because he gets up early. And so I drove to the hospital because I had woken him up. It was like 9 o'clock at night. And our nurse is calling us, just, are like, Eva wasn't making it. And they were having to resuscitate. And it wasn't what we wanted for her. And the nurse wanted us there so badly, wanted us there. And kept making sure, where are we, you know? And I couldn't feed. I didn't want any dramatic event happening. I was holding my tears, holding my fears, just. And at some point on that drive with one of those phone calls, in my mind, I said, Eva, you can go, don't wait for us, just go. And she did. That same palliative care doctor that I said was so amazing, we had a conference after Eva died, which is something that doesn't happen and I think should. Hopefully I inspired that a little bit, but I called everybody like, I need to see you again. And he said, you know, people don't go when their loved ones are there a lot of the times. It's harder to leave when you're present. And I told her to. It wasn't about me. We didn't want her to suffer. And she was suffering. So we got there and she looked like Sleeping Beauty laying in her little bed. And we got to love on her for like, I don't know, 4 hours. It's all just a dream. Tried to imprint to memory every little bit of her fuzzy golden hair and the vein in her forehead. And yeah, that was such, I don't know. We hadn't had a chance to hold her. Daddy hadn't held her really since birth because he was so, I mean, he had, since surgery, I should say. He was so generous with mom needs to hold her, you know. So he got to hold her again. And we went home and he said, I now know what sandpaper, you know, like I've heard people say my eyes feel like sandpaper, and I now know what that feels like. And then, so that was Eva's life and death. And then comes the grief and the eternal healing. So once again, that yoga and meditation just pulled me through. I felt in some ways in those first months too good. I'm sure some of that was shock, but some of that was her love. She would just repeat in my mind's eye, I love you, mama. I love you, mama. I love you, mama. I love you, mama. Like that's what I would hear in my mind.
Yeah.
And sometimes grief, it can be hard to connect for me anyway. And I've heard that from others, but I would try, I would roll out my yoga mat in the morning. That became my ritual. I'd get up before the sunrise because you wake up and you realize my baby's gone. Like every morning it's a remembrance of that, like that trauma every day. Like, oh God, I got to live another day without her. So I would roll out my yoga mat before my son got up and watch the sunrise. And that was always just so beautiful. And most of the time I wouldn't move. I would just cry and I'd get that journal out and I would jot things down and I would jot things she told me. And I had 3 months of maternity leave and I took it all. And when I returned to work, I never went back full time. And that was something that was made, there were special exceptions made for me. And I know some people weren't always happy about that. But again, I'm super grateful. From the top down, I worked for an statewide elected official, and she told me some things about her family and baby loss. And so I don't know, the support was just phenomenal. But when you share, then people just come out of the woodworks. Like I had friends from school saying, you know, when I was a kid, messaging saying my mom lost a baby and we never talked about it. And I wish she would have talked about it. I could see how sad she was. And so I knew I had to talk about it. And that's what I did. I really shared, found this community on Instagram, more so than Facebook. I was real public on Instagram, and I made connections with fellow Miller-Dieker syndrome mothers who lost baby girls at the same time as I did.
Wow.
2 of them are in New Zealand. One is in Australia. Like, I'm telling you, there was a reason we were down on that part of the world.
Right. Yes.
One of them I got to meet. Oh, here's another beautiful little moment. Music is really healing for me. And I have an Eva's playlist. And there was a mom's blog that I found talking about her Lucy with the same syndrome. Yeah. And she had listened to the Avett brothers. And so I started listening to them when I was pregnant with Eva. And there's this song called, there's one called True Sadness, but No Hard Feelings. You listen to that song and you'll just bawl. It's about the end of your life, you know, no hard feelings, this life I've lived. And so their music meant a lot to me. And the summer after Eva died, I bought tickets at a concert venue in Portland, Oregon. And I was going to take Max with me to his first concert and go listen to the Avett brothers, their good folk music. And this mother who had introduced me to them, she'd booked tickets to the exact same concert. And she does not live in Portland, Oregon. She lives in Chicago.
Oh my
But she was flying in to meet with her friends who live in Portland. And it was a 3-night show, and she had booked the exact same night as me. We had not planned it.
Wow.
So we met and hung out and cried and danced, and they ended up playing a song that wasn't even on their playlist called Don't Rock the Cradle, Lucy. And her daughter's name was Lucy. Just, mind blowing, all these situations and circumstances and synchronicities. And there was another woman that lived near me that lost her baby girl that I met with. So I've gotten to meet a couple women in real life that had children with this extremely rare syndrome. Yeah. So the power of social media.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the good stuff of social media.
That's right. Exactly. That's exactly right.
And I would do these, like there was something called May We All Heal, and it was for bereaved parents, a daily prompt. So in that first year, I was really devoted to doing that. And I did a lot of writing and sharing, and I started a blog and just sharing the raw and real of the grief. And, it wasn't just one event. It was the trauma unfolding of figuring out what was wrong with her, carrying her to birth. It wasn't just a day of it. Yeah. It was months of unraveling. So sharing that journey with other people that got it. I have so many good friends with baby loss, not just with the syndrome, but that was just super healing for me. And like I said, the people that come out of the woodwork in your life that then share their stories.
Exactly.
And I just started reflecting. Someday I hope to write about the history of baby loss in some way, because I started reflecting on these oral histories we'd done at work, and like there was little stories of baby loss in those too, even though we were talking about politics and different things. When, for instance, one woman, a Native American woman we had interviewed, I remember her talking about her grandmother who'd lost her baby girl at 3 to tuberculosis. And this woman we had interviewed said, my grandma at 80 years old would talk about her daughter, and tears would just flow down her face. And so for those moms that didn't get all the support that we're thankfully starting, there's still a lot of work to do getting now, but I would just love to tell some of those stories someday, because there was a lot more baby loss then. And do we think just because it was more prevalent they handled it? I don't know. No.
And what an incredible way to honor them, to honor those stories, the mothers, the babies.
I also, this is just something that popped in my head too. Of my grandma's 13 siblings, because I'm the family historian, I had a great uncle, the only one left in the family. He sent me this care package of one of the eldest of this family, like war medals and cards between him and his wife. These people had never had children. And you wonder why, if that was their decision or not. And through those notes between him and his wife, I learned it was not their decision. And that tore me open too into a whole nother understanding of those people in history that, assumptions are made or whatnot. And here they were in this family with all these nieces and nephews and cousins. And I feel like that little care package needed to come to me, someone who understood their story.
That's right.
And even the uncle writing to his wife about how much he wanted this child, hearing his grief about it. Yeah, that was really profound. So sharing, and then there's just these signs from Eva and things that come through.
What kind of signs has she been giving you?
Well, it was a lot early on, because I think she was still trying to help me trust.
Yeah.
Even in the afterlife, I'm still here, Mom. So right after she died, my son was having issues with Hulu, and I had just been crying at Eva's ashes, and I was kind of frustrated. He needed my help. And so I did something and it gave a code. And the first 3 letters were EVA in the code. And that was the first big one. Like, oh, okay. Yeah. Hi. And I was listening to Kelly Meehan's podcast the whole time I was pregnant with Eva. Thank goodness I had that spirit baby knowledge before all of this. But I know that I needed it for our journey, but also to help others. I know that Eva and I are here, as you and Bodhi are, to help others some way, somehow. And I have so many ideas and so little time. In the beginning, I had so many ideas and I was just going to race out and do it. And then grief slaps you back.
That's
and
right.
makes you
That's
realize,
exactly right.
no,
It's important to take that time.
To do.
Yeah, exactly.
But the processing, and I was going to throw out just some ideas for people listening. You know, it's almost been 4 years for me, and of what I did in my grief to heal or move it, you know, like walks in nature. I had this path that I would walk with Eva when I was pregnant, and then I continued walking the summer after she died. And these little damselflies appeared that I'd never seen before. They're like little dragonflies. I have them on this tattoo. And it just felt like little spirit babies, like on the path with us. I'd be bawling, walking, grieving my girl. And then these little fairy creatures would come out of nowhere. And I just more and more have felt the presence of other people's children. I thought I would help others, but I didn't realize it would be in connecting with their children. I want to teach how to connect with their own. But just over the last year, I was going to my friend's yurt to do yoga, and she is such an open and in tune spiritual lady that these babies were coming to me during Shavasana at the end of yoga, and I was getting nervous about sharing, and Kelly, I would reach to it. You got to share. They're coming to, you know, every time the parents would be thankful and grateful. And so that's a really beautiful gift. And I'm opening up to that more and more. There's so many ways that we can help, but, so about ways that so we walked in nature. I took myself. We have a Korean day spa that just has like heated salt rooms and hot pools and stuff. I went there, and not everyone can do this, but it's like $30 for an all day pass. So I would do that once a month. I would sneak off by myself. I know sometimes my friends would like to go, but I would just say it was my way of grieving and nourishing me. One time I met a mother who was raising a special needs son who had he was like 17, 18. And he had a lot of similarities to Eva's diagnosis. So that was really, really powerful to sit there and talk with a mom on the journey I could have been on if Eva had lived.
Exactly. Yeah. Have that awareness.
Yeah, it was just really, I don't know, because in so many ways you want this child back so badly. I want her back, but I don't want her to suffer. And yeah, it's just not about us. It was about her and her journey. And I do believe we have this soul contract. I met with a shaman a day before Eva's first birthday. And, you know, I started meeting with people, and then I realized they're just telling me what I know.
That's right. Exactly. That's exactly
this shaman is doing work in California in pediatric care intensive units. Wow. She connected with this doctor who was having her come to the hospital and work with parents and children, bringing her drum. Like, amazing work. So incredible shaman for me to have a connection with. So definitely things are opening up in that realm and the mainstream and all of that. I mean, I had a free massage in the NICU. That was pretty awesome because that was donated. And I'd like to see more and more of that going on, nourishing of those special need parents and all of that. But yeah, really taking the time to find a moment in the day to be with my grief in that first year was important. And just setting boundaries with people. I think we really reverted to our little threesome some people want the comfort of others around them. And I didn't know how to, I don't know. Like even my mom's an amazing mom and such a nurturer. I know she wanted to nurture. She was trying every which way to nurture, and just needed isolation and to be with it and sit with it. And processing is such a deeply personal thing.
Yeah. Those are all some good points that I think would be extremely helpful for anyone that's listening to this or may in the future, you know, to just remember those things, nature, giving yourself that time and the space, and knowing your boundaries, whatever they might be for each individual. Having that understanding of the importance of being able to take that time to really heal and connect, because we can connect with our babies. Maybe not as much in the deep grief, but that's our time. That's our time to be able to heal. And then once we step through that space, once it becomes a little bit lighter, that's when things start to happen, and we do have that connection that comes through. So I think those are some beautiful points that you've made, and I thank you for remembering them.
Yeah.
Remembering them so that they're there. And I know you took some time to take some notes to remember, and I really honor your way of being able to explain each step of the way, your experiences, your family's experiences, how you shared that with your little boy, Max. What a blessing that will be for him as he grows, to know that relationship and the humanity of it, how mommy and daddy handled it, and the care that was received in the hospital. You know, that's a real blessing that you gave him, rather than keeping him away and not letting him see what was going on. He got to see what was going on, and who knows where that will take him in his future. So such a gift that
it definitely opens him up to empathy in a way that he wouldn't have received otherwise.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
And you know, he would see me crying.
Yeah.
He would see me crying, and he would say, "Is it Eva?" And I'd say, "Yeah." You know, I'm going to show just some tangible items are good, right?
Yes.
So here is a pillow that we made for Max to snuggle with Sissy on it.
Beautiful.
Him and her, and his favorite picture of her is right there. So that's in his room. And Eva is our twinkle star. I sing a song to each of my children when I'm pregnant, and hers was Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. And it's taken a while for me to hear that song again, but she is just, I would go up to I still go out into the night sky and stare up at those stars and talk to her and think of her, and everything beautiful is her. It's all good.
I love that. Everything beautiful is her. And I wanted to share for those who might be mentioned the Spirit Baby book. So I will put the link to this book at the bottom so that everyone can see it. And if you're interested, you can always get it on Amazon.
There's a lot of wisdom in that book.
Yes, there is. So I want to thank you, Lori, and everyone who listens to this. I will put Lori's information. She has a website that also shares a story and how she is stepping into supporting women as well, and fathers, mothers and fathers. And I just really honor this and give thanks that you were willing to step up and come share your story. So thank you so much, Lori.
Oh, thank you, Tracey. I honestly feel uplifted now leaving this conversation. Every time I share,
I'm so glad. And in the sharing is healing. We've said that, you've said that. I found that myself so many times. In the sharing is healing, and so many people come forward when they hear a story that they can relate to, and they know they're not alone. So that is the purpose of this, is to create space for more healing to continue in whatever way it's meant to. So thank you. And thank you, everyone. And yes, I am going to end this, and
Love to all out there watching
Love
this.
to all. Yeah. And
Yeah.
peace and
Mhm.
gratitude.
Thanks, Tracey.